Imagine a city so confident it thinks of the future as inevitable. Streets of commerce humming, cable cars clanging, lamps burning in a soft golden dusk. Now imagine that in a single breath, the ground beneath that confidence moves like the turn of a page. Houses tear open, water turns to steam, gas lines scream, fires roar where no flame had reason to live. By morning, wooden neighborhoods smolder. By night, a great city is ash. This is not fiction. This happened on April 18th, 1906. This is the night San Francisco broke, and the whole nation watched to learn whether a modern city could survive disaster. In the spring of 1906, San Francisco was a place of industry, ambition, and restless energy. Wealth flowed from ports and rail yards. Millionaires built mansions on hills that looked down on the bay. Immigrants packed the neighborhoods with life and work. Cable cars climbed steep streets, and theaters opened late into the night. At the center of that life was a city of wood and stone, pipes and wires, a patchwork of old and new. The modern conveniences that made daily life possible also hid a risk. Gas piped under streets, water mains that could fail, wooden buildings standing shoulder to shoulder. Across the San Andreas Fault, the land had stored strain for decades. Scientists and residents felt the occasional tremor and shrugged it off. The city went on building, trading, living as if the past always predicted the future. But the earth keeps records of stress that no ledger can show. And on one spring dawn, those records became a violent message. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18th, a long and terrible rupture began to run along the San Andreas Fault. What people felt was immediate and total. The street became a living thing underfoot, a violent roll that lasted long enough to rewrite a lifetime of assumptions. Homes shifted on foundations, streetcar rails broke and buckled, and mansions trembled like paper. People fell into the street, clutching children and coats, as chimneys collapsed, sending bricks like hail. The noise was not like thunder. It was a grinding groan, the sound of rock tearing rock, and the city answering back. At first, no one understood the scale. Some thought an explosion. Some thought a train derailment. Then the shaking slowed, and a stunned quiet filled the avenues, a terrible hush, like the pause between heartbeats. That pause lasted only a moment, because pause is the breath before the next act of disaster. Gas mains had already fractured. Water mains had already snapped. Fires were about to begin where there had been no flame. Buildings half collapsed looked like stage sets toppled by a clumsy hand. The climbing cable cars that had just been full of mourning riders hung like broken toys, their cables slack, the cars tilted at odd angles on broken tracks. Telephone and telegraph wires were down, so messages could not travel fast enough to match the speed of the catastrophe. Rescue became improvisation. Men and women pulled at jammed doors, pried crushed timbers with bare hands. Hands bled but did not stop. Across neighborhoods, the injured were laid on blankets, the dead covered with sheets in doorways, because there was nowhere else to go. At the waterfront, ships rode out the tremor, and sailors looked back at a skyline that would never be the same. The real enemy arrived in another form. Where gas lines broke, the escaping fuel found a single spark, and 1,000 small fires began. Water that should have been the city's lifeline could not reach the flames. The mains that fed hydrants had ruptured. The pumps could not maintain pressure. Firefighters fought with whatever they could get, but hoses that had worked yesterday lay useless now. The water slithered away in fractures underground, or boiled where steam met cold air. Block after block caught fire. The wind pushed embers from rooftop to rooftop, and buildings lit like matchboxes. Within hours, a single earthquake had been eclipsed by a disaster of fire and smoke that wrapped the city in a column of orange night.
and that smoke carried with it more than heat. It carried the collapse of order. Businesses that kept the city fed and financed were gone or burning. Where there had been records, there was ash, and where there had been addresses, there was ruin. To understand an earthquake, look at the people who lived it. Meet Maria, a bakery owner on a narrow street near Mission Hill. She woke to a house that shook like a tide. She managed to drag a sack of flour and a few loaves into the street, and later helped neighbors by giving warm bread to those shivering on the curb. Her hands smelled of soot for weeks after, but she kept baking in tents and makeshift ovens for families who had nowhere else to eat. Then there was Nurse Alvarez from a tiny clinic who walked for miles through smoke to help the wounded, stitch wounds and calm the frightened until dawn. And the immigrant families of Chinatown who watched their wooden lanes ignite while at the same time fighting discrimination in the rebuilding that followed. These human stories are not mere color. They are the moral center of the event. People making choices, small and large, in a city otherwise falling apart.
Each small story shows a way communities hold together when institutions fray. Neighbors opened doors, strangers carried children, crowds formed human chains, anything to move the injured out of danger. As firestorms advanced, the city's mayor and emergency officials faced choices that would decide the fate of entire neighborhoods. They called the army into the streets to restore order and to assist in firefighting and rescue. Soldiers and volunteers ripped down buildings, created fire breaks, and attempted controlled demolitions where it might slow the fire's progress. Curfews were issued, property was requisitioned, and for many, the rules of peacetime gave way to the necessity of saving the larger city. But order came with trade-offs. Reports of looting and harsh enforcement followed reports of courage and sacrifice. The response showed how fragile civil authority can be, and at the same time how quickly new structures of emergency power can form when the old ones fail. For more than 48 hours, San Francisco burned in pockets, then in broad swaths. The skyline glowed with an unearthly light that could be seen across the bay. When morning came, the panorama revealed charred blocks, flattened skeletons of warehouses, and ash drifting down like a snowfall of ruin. Thousands were homeless. Neighborhood after neighborhood had been reduced to piles of rubble and smoking chimney stumps. The immediate death toll was staggering, and the injured filled hospitals and makeshift wards in tents, parks, and even in the open air. But the most insidious damage went deeper than brick and timber. Legal records, business ledgers, birth certificates, they were on paper, and paper burns easily. So reconstruction would be tangled in questions of ownership and debt. Within days, tent camps and temporary shelters sprang up in parks, on hillsides, and in any open stretch where people could gather. Charities, private donors, and the federal government sent food, clothing, and medicine. But the scale of need was enormous. A refugee becomes more than a statistic when you listen to his voice, when you watch him walk a ruined street, looking for a place that used to be his home. San Franciscans shared stories of kindness, a church opening its doors, an immigrant mutual aid society organizing food lines, an ordinary family turning their front yard into a soup kitchen. At the same time, there were fights over resources and complaints that aid came unevenly. Some neighborhoods got help faster because of influence and visibility. Others felt ignored. News of the disaster rippled across the nation and around the world. Photographers recorded the devastation in shocking images, blackened streets and twisted rails that editors could not ignore. Newspapers ran headlines, and relief funds were organized in cities from New York to Boston. The government watched closely, not only out of compassion but because San Francisco's fate mattered to national commerce and geopolitics. The port was a gateway to the Pacific and to American trade in Asia. The disaster raised urgent questions about whether modern cities could be resilient enough to support a modern economy after catastrophe. If there is a single story about San Francisco after the quake, it is the story of rebuilding. Relentless, pragmatic rebuilding. Within months, architects, surveyors, and builders moved across the ruins, drawing plans and arguing about materials. Where formerly wood had ruled, now came brick, stone, and reinforced frames. And the first conversations about earthquake-resistant design entered public debate in earnest. Insurance disputes dragged on, courts filled with claims and counterclaims. Ownership had to be proven or settled, and that legal tangle slowed some reconstruction, while others moved quickly to claim lots and rebuild faster than before. There was also an urgency to show the world the city would stand. City leaders wanted visitors, investors, and markets to see progress,
So the race to open businesses and to put new facades on old lots became a civic crusade. In 1915, San Francisco hosted the Panama Pacific Exposition, a public statement that a humbled and rebuilt city could welcome the world again. The exposition became both celebration and proof, a showcase for new architecture, civic optimism, and the city's claim to a future on the Pacific Rim. The fair's classical pavilions and lamplit promenades were also a carefully staged declaration that the wounds of 1906 had been healed, if not entirely forgotten. The earthquake forced scientists to look closer at the Earth's mechanics and to think about cities differently. Engineers began to study how buildings respond to violent ground motion and how to design foundations and frames that could survive shaking. Seismology matured from amateur observation into a discipline with instruments and field studies that would inform building codes for decades to come. Policymakers learned that prevention required investment in infrastructure that could survive emergencies, water systems that could keep pressure even after a quake, and gas systems designed to shut off automatically when lines break. Reconstruction is never only technical, it is also political and social. In San Francisco, debates over who would return, who would rebuild, and who would profit shaped neighborhoods for generations. Some communities rebuilt grander and wealthier, others were displaced. Some residents never returned. Whole districts were repurposed, and the social geography of the city changed in ways that still echo today. Disasters reveal character, of individuals and nations. San Francisco's earthquake was a violent teacher. It showed how fragile modern life can be, and how stubbornly human communities respond and remake themselves. From the bakery tents to the great exposition halls, the city's story became one of endurance and reinvention, and an argument for designing cities that expect to be tested not once but many times. When you walk the rebuilt streets today and see the cable car climb and the bay glittering at sunset, remember that beneath the pavement, the earth remembers too, and that we are only safer when we take the memory seriously. This was the night the city shook, but it was not the night